Hello there, and thanks for joining us again today on Dr. Teach Me to Parent. Glad you're with us because we have a great program really entitled today in the area of moral development in the home. How do families create a moral environment? How do parents teach moral principles to their children? How do we live morally in our culture today? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So join us and get somebody to join with you as you watch the program today. And if you know somebody that might be of interest in this particular topic, give them a call and have them tune in. So this is a good time as we have another hour together with you on this area of moral development within the family. So we have two great guests that are going to contribute from their own personal experience and their own professional background. Kathy Moore is with us, parent of two children and a retired school teacher with the Fresno Unified School District for how many years?
Well, 34 altogether, but not all there.
A lot of years of teaching.
Yeah.
And teaching moral development, I hope, at some point. So we're going to share that with us. And Pastor Paul Micu of the Riverview Bible Church in Clovis, and father of 9 kids. So we have a little contribution here as parents and as a pastor to contribute to this particular conversation. So join us as we pick this up now. Now, as I do every time, I want to start this with a little quote and give you a little perspective on what we're going to be talking about today. So here's the quote for the day, and you can learn it, okay? Courage without moral conscience is a wild beast. Philosopher Ingersoll said that. And we see that today in a lot of different situations of our culture and our communities. People who are behaving beyond the scope of normalcy, beyond the scope of reasonableness, beyond the scope of kindness. And maybe because that sense of moral development hasn't really occurred and become part of their life. So I want you to kind of think of it in the sense of being very much part of our conversation today and picking up our conversation on moral development in the home and the family. So my question to you is, are kids really born with a kind of a sense of moral development or moral sense, and you just add to it as a parent? You just kind of shape it as a parent. Or are kids born like a blank slate and they have no sense of morality, and it's up to you as a parent to introduce it and inculcate it within the life of a child? What would you say? You have an opinion on that?
Ladies first.
Okay.
Kathy.
Kathy, help yourself.
Okay. Well, I think that very little babies, you can hardly tell exactly where they're coming from, except that they have needs. And I think they're born with a sense of, I need to survive. It's like so they're crying when they have a need. They let you know when they have a need. And so I think that there's something there that's already built in for them to want to survive and to survive themselves. Although
Some people have said that that's really one of the first steps of moral development, is to kind of know that you personally, have a need, and that you can interact with your world to meet that need.
And then, to say the opposite of or not the opposite, but the other part of what you said, is that the parent comes in right away as well. So there's the original need that the baby has, and the parent is trying to meet that need. And how that parent does that, it is she or he is already starting to form some kind of moral development.
So you're really taking the position that it all starts with mom. It all starts with dad. It all starts with that parent in that first little interaction where there's a need and a response to that.
There's an attachment that starts, and then there's a lot more to say about that, but yeah. Paul, I'm interested in your thoughts.
We're going to come back to your word of attachment. That's a good word.
From a Christian worldview and understanding of human creation, I've got to take us all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, where we're made in the image of God. And so being made in our Creator's image, there is something innate and that we're born with, understanding who God is, who we are in light of who He is, And short answer to your question, I believe that's very innate, and that it's something we're born with. Now, definitely it's trained and disciplined, and it grows and it develops from there. But there is something, from my understanding of Scripture, about the way God created us in His image.
So if that's true, teaching then becomes a critical mechanism or a critical part of moral development. You can't have moral development without a teacher then, or somebody that's going to respond to the need. I guess if you think of that as a responder, and so you think of first responders, but maybe that is the first responder in the area of morality.
Yes.
You know, it's the parent. That's the first responder.
I would think so. I mean, that's the first unit God created and designed was marriage, and then parenting thereafter. And it's fascinating that the two who were made in God's image, originally the first on this earth, had a running start at perfection as a marriage and a family. And we know where that went south with everything from the debacle at the tree with Adam and Eve and their problems within their marriage, and then with their children committing murder with Cain killing Abel. And so that definitely is a great reflection of not only being made in God's image, but the rebellion man has had in seeking our own and the way sin has affected us. And the need, therefore, for development and morality training and discipline and so forth.
I would like to say, too, that Scripture talks about the baby being formed, God's aware of the baby being formed in the mother's womb. And I believe that part of that is the bents and the capacities that little one is going to have and then develop. So, yeah, I think there is a lot that happens within a little baby, even before
But if you look at it this way, if a parent and child is not bond, as you're speaking, there can be no teaching. There can be no learning. I mean, you learn from the person that you bond with, that you respect, that you like, and that you depend on, and that you find that meets your needs.
You know, as a very brand new born, like I was saying earlier, they are letting you know their needs. And as they are met by that mother, that parent, there is something hugely important that is developed within that child, and that is trust. That's the foundation on which you can have, like you're saying, an environment where that child can learn and be trained and feel safe.
So a lot of learning will take place if the right environment is created.
Yeah. Part of that environment is where that parent has the authority. That's where trust comes in. If you can put yourself under the authority of someone that you trust, that you know loves you, in time you'll get that word, you'll get that awareness. And then you are in a place where you can learn and be trained.
There's a safe
And
environment for
it's a
learning to
safe
take place.
environment, yeah.
Because you have to have a safe environment to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a place to become.
And I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of kids that are born in an environment that is not safe.
Yeah.
Homes are not safe. Parents are erratic in their behavior patterns in all kinds of ways. And there's not that safe environment.
Yeah.
So it's not only is morality maybe not learned, but maybe a lot of areas of life, of daily life, are not learned.
In the public school, you can kind of see sometimes children that come from families like that, and they don't feel safe. And because they don't feel safe, they try to take control of their environment. So they are always on a kind of the mindset of, you're against me, and so I'm against you. I wonder if that doesn't develop in people
Just
to
a lot of
get to be
different-
adults, and
Yeah.
then they are acting out in uncontrollable ways, like
Yeah.
your little quote
Yeah.
talks about.
See, we've been talking about this word of morality. Morals, morality, moral development, moral life. What is morality? I mean, what are we talking about? Is this kind of a badge of honor of somebody earn? Is it kind of a skill that you have that you are born with? Is it an ability? Is it an attribute? Is it a trait? Is it a personality pattern? Is it an emotion?
I think
What are we talking about?
C.S. Lewis talks about morality in a way that there's a universal understanding of even right and wrong, if we could put it in those terms.
Okay, well, maybe that's the definition.
He talks about a straight line, and that you wouldn't know what a crooked line looks like unless you know what a straight line is. And he parallels that in his book Mere Christianity with understanding morality, understanding right and wrong, this universal law that exists, back to the innate word, inside each one of us. We happen to know what crooked looks like because there's something inside of us that knows really where the bar sits, and that we fall so short of that oftentimes.
So that straight line is the standard.
Yes, exactly.
So there needs to be a standard, which I assume is then set by parents.
Yeah, certainly guided. However, I think that if I were teaching morals in school, I wouldn't be teaching the do's and the don'ts. I would be teaching the morals of kindness and virtue and considering another person. So I think that morality is that judgment that a person comes to these principles of right and wrong and determines what is the behavior I'm going to have. So it's like a judgment that's kind of influenced by wisdom, by knowing yourself, by knowing the circumstance, by knowing the people, and the timing. All those things are factors that come into that judgment of choosing. Am I going to do this action or this action, the right and the wrong? Those are like the standards, the rules, the laws.
So really, you're coming down to the right and wrong kind of behavior, the good or bad. So that means that somebody has to determine that. Somebody has to kind of set where the line ends. You know, have a straight line, but at some point, you know, that line ends, and now we don't go into this because that becomes a crooked line. You know, if you think of it that way, it's not two different lines, but maybe an extension of one line. It's straight, but then it becomes crooked.
Yeah.
And before it becomes crooked, somebody's got to step in and.
So you do have to define where's your foundation for finding that standard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, usually you think, well, this is where I was raised. This is the way my parents raised me, so that must be all right, right? And society changes, culture changes, and so on. And is that the standard, or is there really an absolute right and an absolute wrong?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. Well, let me tell you this story. My dad was a mechanical engineer. He built machines. So in order to fulfill a purpose. So the person who's going to buy this machine has to know the instructions from the builder in order for that purpose of that machine to be able to come to fruition. I believe we're created also by God. And he, knowing us, has his standard for us to know what it's going to be, the path we need to follow in order to be fulfilled, in order to fulfill the purpose he has for us, given the bents and the capacities and all those things. So really, following his ways is our best path toward fulfillment, and those are the standards that many people live by. Just to take this a step further, in the public schools, I'm not going to the Bible, but I'm a person who can live that before them. I can treat them that way according to those standards. Basically, it's for the common good. It's for the best interest of those
so the common good is
children.
part of morality. Yeah, a kid has to learn, has to be taught, has to have that sense, right and wrong, but right and wrong is also defined in the sense of the common good. What is good for all is good for me. And what's good for me is good for all. I mean, that idea, common good.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's what I think.
let me ask you a question. If it's learned in part, it's a process of learning, where does this start? Where does it start? I mean, are we talking about kids in the ages of 1, 2, 3? Are we talking, preschool? Are we talking about the early school? Are we talking about mid-school? Are we talking about junior high? Where is the primary time? What is the primary time of learning morality in the home and in the school and in the life of a kid? Is there a year? Is there a time in their life that's really critical? Or is it ongoing? Is it from birth to whenever?
You mentioned the fact that I've got 9 children, and they range from the age of 8 all the way up to 23. And so I've got the younger, and I've got adult children who are in college or graduate or have graduated. And I've really enjoyed the different seasons of parenting, and I can't go to any one particular year that says this is the key time. I can't drop the ball on my adult kids. They need me, and I want to interact them in a different way, but yet hopefully still steering them in a particular direction and a trajectory that we've wanted to take them since birth. And so I hope it's all building upon one another, not in any one season. I understand the formative years and the developmental years in the first 5 years and how key those are and how much we actually gain during that time. But we can't let our guard down as parents or take off our parenting job hat just because they come to a certain age and say, hey, you're on your own now. I believe there's a wonderful opportunity to parent the younger and the older kids and pointing them to.
So you're always a parent.
Always
in your
a parent.
point. I mean,
definitely.
I mean, for 2 things. One, you're always a parent as an active parent in the parenting process. But you talked about another aspect of that. You enjoy it.
Yes.
There's certain enjoyment that comes from continuing to be a parent, no matter how old.
That's correct.
I agree with what you're saying, and I want to go back to the very beginning again. I think how a parent responds to a child, a baby, the very beginning, is setting an environment that, as we talked about earlier, allows them to feel trust, which allows them to come under authority and be trained and taught. And then there's the time when words are important. But I remember a baby thrashing and not being happy. So how do you don't talk to that baby, you have to act. So I remember just holding this little baby close as if to say that kind of behavior is not really fruitful, and what you want, I'm going to hold you close. So I'm saying
Kind of
something.
protective from
Yeah,
inappropriate
but also,
bad behavior.
Well, but saying to them there's another way. So they're all the way through before they're able to take in words. You're building an environment for that time when they can hear you because they can trust you, and then you can speak into the scenarios that life brings and talk and train and teach.
What grade did you teach?
Elementary, so all the way through 6th grade, but in the classroom through 3rd.
Because the research has seemed to show this. If you're just break it in half, you can break it into a lot of different bits and pieces, but break it in half. Then it's around grade 5 that moral development really takes hold in the life of a child. Before that, kids are very self-centered.
Yeah.
You know, babies are very self-centered.
Yeah.
Young children are very self-centered. You know, 3rd graders, 4th graders are very self-centered. What's in it for me? And, you know, that's how they look at life. And that's understandable, I guess. But it is until about grade 5 and grade 6 that they begin to be aware that they have to think of somebody else and how my behavior affects somebody else and how their behavior affects me. And that interactional thing, when that takes place about 5, 6, grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, and that junior high years, those are the critical years of moral development. Now, you've gone through that with all your kids. Would that be fairly true?
I could see how those are definitely key years, but I don't know how I would personally be able to say those are, you know, more important or stronger development toward morality during that time. The research and science behind that, but the practical side from somebody who's not versed in all that just knows, boy, like you said, a baby being cuddled and held, or also a baby learning to cry on its own are things they're learning something. And adults who are adult children who are past that, I think they're putting their morality to the test, and they're always learning and gaining and making decisions that they'll have to learn from as well.
Yeah.
You know, I was just thought of the prayer that Jesus prayed for his disciples, and then he said, I'm praying for those who follow after and their teaching. And at the end he says, and I have made you known to them, and I will continue to make God known to them. I think that's what a parent's role is, and it starts early because you're developing that trust. They're looking to you, kind of like
Yeah.
you're taking God's place at
Yeah.
first, but you are teaching them about God. You're teaching them about His ways. You're teaching them to go to God on their own. And like you say, as you go through the years, then getting to the place where they're adults, hopefully then that just transfers from you to God. And then you give them opportunities to just have those times where they are praying to God and seeking what is His direction for me with this moral choice. And then they may make the wrong choice, but they learn from it. It's an ongoing learning. And actually, didn't say this before, but as a parent, you are definitely in a learning place that whole time. I think God has you being a parent so He can continue to parent you. It's not like you have it all together, ever. I hope at this age I'm still learning.
Yeah, we think we do sometimes, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it seems to me what you've really divided here is the idea of preparation. There's early years of preparation to learn morality. You don't learn morality, but you prepare a child to learn morality.
Yeah.
And then as they come into, let's say, grade 5, grade 6, morality is kind of ramped up. I mean, you really talk about what is right and wrong, and you do this because of certain reasons, you do that because of certain, and you don't do certain things because of certain reasons. And you really set some boundaries, and you set some fences up, and you create some lines, and hopefully you get that straight line right out in front of them. You become more active as a parent, it seems to me. So if you look at it this way, when a kid is in 6th grade, just take one child in a family, that kid's, what, 10, 11? Parents at that point in time, they're in their careers, they're in their own lifestyle, they're got all kinds of things going on in life. They often back off from the child. They often are not as active in the life of the children, because they're in their own life at that point in time. But it's precisely the time when kids need moral teaching, because they're tuned to it. They're open to it. They'll learn.
And they're giving all kinds of opportunities to implement it, too. I think it's important when you talk about the busyness of a parent at that time, that sometimes when they see their child going in a wrong direction, they will lay down some restrictions like this. And I really think it's so much better to purpose to listen. I think listening is a really important thing as those children are in that place of learning moral development. You say they're teachable, you say they're open to it, but there has to be, I think, the listening to their process so that they have space to try and to become, and to get the affirmation from you as a parent that you can trust them to make some good decisions.
So a parent at that age really has to deliberately be alert to teaching opportunity or to the need for teaching morality at grade 6, we'll say. Use that as a keystone age. You can't let that go. You can't bypass that. You can't overlook that. I mean, that's really where a parent has to kind of come forward and really look at their kids and say, are they behaving in a manner that is moral? Are they sensitive to other people? Are they caring about other people? Do they consider other people? And if not, there's a lot of teaching that's going to have to be done.
I think that teaching is more heard when they're also listened to. That's just the two sides of
Well, it's the
of that
interaction.
conversation. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which says that families need to talk together.
Yeah.
Families need to eat together. They need to ride in the car together. They need to walk together. They need to work together.
Be a family.
Because that's where that teaching takes place.
Yeah, even as Scripture says, you just do it as you're walking down the road, or you're making your meal, or you're in very natural ways.
Yes.
Yeah, very natural ways.
So you think morality is really taught more what you call naturally, kind of just on the run, on the give and take, on the interaction, as compared to sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to teach you now about honesty. Honesty is.
It's both and, isn't it?
I mean,
where there's a
we make fun
formal
of it, but I wonder if
aspect.
that's true.
There's got to be the formal as well as the informal. It's the daily as well as the intentional. I think Scripture is very clear about two settings as it pertains to our moral development. One is the church and one is the home. And it's very delineated in Scripture on the way church is to be conducted and what it's supposed to reflect, its purpose, who it's made up of, even the preaching of the word, that formal proclamation of Scripture. And then also the fellowship of God's people and that informal. It's the same in the home. My wife and I have to be intentional and formal about the development of our children, not just academically, but even morally. And then, as Kathy just so well put it, this is when you rise up. This is as you walk along. This is as you lay down. There's a wonderful book called Everyday Talk. Author is Younts, Y-O-U-N-T-S. Everyday Talk. It's really how to implement the gospel in parenting to where it isn't simply relegated to the formal, and then you just live life however. You know what happens? Hypocrisy sets in, and then the kids don't build that trust because mom and dad are teaching me these things, and yet they live in this way. Or we're allowed to live in this way and they don't care. So the formal and the informal must go hand in hand. We see that from Scripture in both the church and in the home.
You know, talking about the informal, that's really, the parent needs to be a model of this. We have to not put on ourselves that we have to be perfect and look just right and all that. I think really some of the impacts that have happened in my life are through the mistakes that my parents made, and they admitted it and asked forgiveness. Because that is such a part of life.
Every parent does that. I mean, you do the best you can.
Yeah, right.
But, obviously you want to do the important things.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you've gone short on some of the important things, sure you feel badly. And that's morality in itself, is to feel badly that you didn't do something. In the same way that you feel good that you did something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of morality, is that you get a sense internally that you did the right thing. Or you didn't do the right thing. And you should have.
And you process it with your kids.
Now you talk about it. And you do. But it seems to me that the Catholic Church has stepped up to the plate and has really done a good job here. Wanting the kids right from birth, setting up their catechism, setting up their instructional program for kids, wanting kids to really learn, not only the doctrines of the Catholic Church, but a morality as well. And you talked about the church having a role there, but there's many, many people who don't go to church. Now we don't have that issue. We don't have that influence. So then we only have that of the parent and maybe the school teacher, maybe a neighbor, maybe a grandma, grandpa. I mean, that takes the place. I mean, good is the kid that has all these teachers in his life. Now, the church and the grandma and the parents and grandpa and neighbors and friends and, where they're all kind of living a life the same, that there is something good to live and do it.
Hopefully there's the input from those things that you mentioned, but especially the home, that of God and their own relationship with God. And so that will never change, that will never leave them if they come to the reality that God loves them and they can respond to that. So there's that.
Good. Hey, we're going to take a break. When I come back from the break, here's what I'm going to ask you this question. What are the 5 things that as a parent you teach your kids in the area of morality, moral development? What are the 5 things that you really say, these are the key issues that I teach, and here's how I do it? And from the church's perspective, what are the 5 things that a church can teach or add to that? Maybe it's the same, maybe it's different. But what's the role of the church there in teaching the kids that morality? So we're going to look at that when we come back, and get a cup of coffee and come on back and join us in a few minutes. And before you go, let me just bring this to your attention one more time. I have a class. It's online. It's the Dr. Teach Me to Parent book that this program is based on. And the address is right down here below. It's an online course on parenting. So if you'd like a course on parenting, take a class in parenting. It's a short class, but it's based on my book, Dr. Teach Me to Parent. If you happen to be in a situation where you have to take a class in parenting because of the court's ruling or some reason, this might be a course that you may want to take and fulfill that obligation as well. So check it out, and we'll see you in a minute, a couple minutes.
The in-house services we offer here are Total Life Change, anger management, one-on-one biblical counseling. We do a marriage enrichment, codependency and chemical dependency one-on-one counseling. We have a relapse prevention piece. We also do a lot of workshops where we inform and educate people on different topics. There is one-on-one individual sessions, and we also have group therapy that we work in a group. We find that can be so advantageous when you know you're not alone. The key is to call, email, online, and get a hold of one of the receptionists here, and we will do an assessment. We are not here to direct, guide, and force. We're here to meet you where you're at, then direct, then guide, and then give you options to break free.
When you need a dentist who has a passion for superior aesthetics and comfort, you need Dr. Christopher Wong with Cedar North Dental. Call 559-432-4948 or visit cedarnorthdental.com.
Try to close the club.
Tanya, come here.
At Boys and Girls Clubs, it's not just about trying new things.
Kitchen in my hometown.
It's not about learning the right steps
4,
or making contact.
5, 6, 7, 8.
It's not about exploring the future. It's about helping them build it. It's about taking steps to greatness. About making a connection. It's about proving every kid and teen has what it takes. It's about people in our clubs who bring out the greatness in every kid who enters our doors. It's not just about being on stage. It's about walking across it. Great futures start here, and here, and here.
Sat7 is a Christian media network that uses uncensored satellite television to broadcast across the Middle East and North Africa, and is also available globally online.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Okay, welcome back as we now pick up again the second part here of the Dr. Teach Me to Parent course on moral development in the home, teaching morality to our kids, parents working with church, church working with parents, with school teachers, all together, coming together to help our kids learn what moral behavior really is all about and how to live a moral behavior pattern. And live it within the family, live it within the community, live it within the school, live it among your peers, and so on. So that's where we are, and we're at the question that I asked just before our break was, how do you teach it? How, as a parent, as a pastor, as a school teacher, how do you teach morality? Can you give us maybe a couple, one or two each, and then we'll add to that a list a little bit. How do you definitely teach morality? What do you do to say, okay, I'm now teaching morality to my kids?
You mentioned the term catechism earlier,
Yeah.
and how oftentimes that's related, or at least associated with the Roman Catholic Church. But the Protestants of old, after the Reformation, had a very strong discipline of catechism, and I think we've lost that, especially in the American church today. Oftentimes, what I see in families in the church is there's this reliance upon church, upon Sunday school, upon VBS to do that moral training and teaching, and it's sort of farmed out, if you will, it alleviates, at least in the minds of some parents, of that responsibility. But God is very clear, Ephesians 6:1, on what it means to discipline and instruct our children, and for children to obey that instruction. And so I mentioned earlier how there is a formal aspect and an informal. And perhaps in our home, if I could walk you through some of the formal catechism, we appreciate things from the Westminster Shorter, as well as other documents and creeds from old catechisms. But I've had to personalize that for our own family, on what it means to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. If that's our purpose, what does that look like? So in our home, I would hope that if you would ask any of my 9 kids, that the formal teaching would have come across in that I would ask them this question on an ongoing basis. And that's really what catechism is. It's a continual repetition of teaching. And some people fear repetition because they think that becomes rote. It becomes just kind of taken for granted and in one ear, out the other. But really, we are great beneficiaries of repetition. Just look at our daily schedules. We repeat certain things because it becomes our daily way of life, and we learn, we build blocks upon one another as we repeat certain behaviors and truths. So when it comes to repetitive questions in catechism in our home, I'll start with the question, the gospel begins with. If my kids don't understand what the good news of Jesus Christ is, I've not done my job, not just because I'm in ministry as a pastor, but as a father who believes God's word calls me to that very high calling as a father to lead my family in this way. But I'll ask formally, what is the gospel begins with, and they all ought to be able to answer, a high view of God. Before God gave His law in the book of Exodus and the 10 Commandments, He revealed who He was. He had Moses take off his sandals because he's standing on holy ground, not because the dirt was holy, but because God is holy. And Moses had to understand the character of God, and that God is a loving, rescuing God who takes His children and even provides by grace a way for them to be rescued, because Israel should have been destroyed along with the Egyptians. They were just as disobedient as Pharaoh and the rest. They were grumblers. But because of the blood on the doorposts of their home, God shows His grace. And so there's this understanding that we begin with who God is and a high view of who He is. He's glorious. He's sovereign. He's holy. He's loving. He's gracious. He's kind. And to begin there, and then secondly, I would say, in addition to a high view of God, the gospel also includes what, kids? And they would, I hope, and I think they would respond with, a low and a humble view of ourselves. As we see God for who He is and His character and His truth, we see ourselves created to worship Him, and yet worshiping ourselves and things of this world. And we're humbled by that fact.
And that's a hard thing to teach kids, because kids are not humble by nature early in life.
And it's easy for me as a stronger, older parent figure to lord myself over so that they fear me.
Yeah.
And wait a minute, we're taught to think of God rightly. I'm not the one who's in charge authority ultimately. Pointing them to God gives a low and humble view of ourselves. So therefore, the gospel concludes with and points us with a high view of God and low view of yourselves toward the gospel and the good news of Christ. There is one, a glorious one, an amazing God-man who would fulfill all of the commandments that God laid out for his people. They couldn't fulfill it. There's one who did, and it's Christ, and it's his shed blood, and it's his perfect life, and his death, and his resurrection that I want my kids to see desperately, to desire that, because they see in themselves the inability even to carry out daily morality.
That's quite an undertaking as a parent, a teaching parent, because a parent has to have that sense, has to have that knowledge, has to have that ability to tie that all together and help a kid see that. What do you do, Kathy, as a
Yeah,
parent?
I was going to
how do
say,
you
I think
introduce that?
beginning, reading to the kids stories at night and doing it from Bible stories that are geared for children. But then I think there's almost has to be a little carryover to the right now, you today kind of thing and applying it. And I remember that we would see the scenario or see the truth and moral that we wanted to teach our little child and create a little story that was them as a main character, but they didn't know it. It was like a little bear or a little something else in the same scenario, and then see how it turned out when it wasn't dealt with and then when it was dealt with. So you kind of put the input of the truth of God, and then you carry it over to their little life so that they can grab hold of it for themselves. And you're just tuned in. You have to be tuned in to what their life is like and what happened that day.
What about this idea that as a parent, your job is to monitor your kids' behavior? And when the kids behave in a way that shows morality, shows that they're thinking of other people, showing that they're considering right and wrong, considering that they're trying to do the right thing in a situation, you praise them at that time. You reward them at that time. You stop and you talk about it, and you show how wonderful that is and how happy you are for them and how proud you are of them that they're thinking that way or talking that way. It's kind of rewarding kids for being thoughtful of others even.
Yeah. I think they live for the affirmation of their parents. So that's a great motivator.
But it's when they behave in that sense, that moral behavior, that's when you nail it with a praise or commendation of such type.
Yeah, yeah. You're reinforcing what they chose to do on their own. They're implementing what you've taught them. So that's great.
Do you think it's a difference between you and your wife as a mother giving praise as compared to you as a father praising the kid in the area of moral development? Do you think there's a difference here between mothers and fathers? We always think of mothers teaching a lot of this, but you introduced that idea of saying, I'm a father, and it's my responsibility to be the moral developer of my family.
Yes, yeah. Well, oftentimes we're sold the bill of goods as a father that if I make the income and allow my family to just have a decent way of living, then I'm doing my job. But Scripture talks about work in a God-glorifying way for sure. But it talks about being a father in very explicit instruction. That's very important, that there be a complementary relationship between husband and wife in the parenting of their children.
I think, too, that we as people who are not in the profession of being a pastor don't leave the church, don't leave that teaching up to the church. I think your words seem to indicate it's the parents and the church helps the family. I think that's the right thing. Parents have a huge job, and we are imperfect, and we are in the bit. We're being parented at the same time, but we're all in the process.
I asked that question because there's some research that shows that the impact of the father's teaching in this area of life is greater on the child than the impact of the mother's teaching. Not to diminish the mother's efforts in teaching, but to really enhance the fact that the father's impact is greater.
When I show up on a playground, oftentimes maybe my wife's talking with other moms and kids are playing. It's amazing how they want to show me what they can do on the monkey bars and they can do. And in the playground, they're calling for my attention as if that affirmation, this goes beyond my own children. We're talking other kids, even stranger kids that I don't know. Hey, look at me, look at what I can do. And so I think there is an aspect of both male and female that God has divinely designed, both in the affirmation and the training up and the development of children.
Yeah, at the same time, you know, there's a lot of homes out there where there's a mother raising kids. Father's not there. I mean, that's unfortunate, but that's true. When that happens and you're in a situation, just do the best you can. I mean, just pour it on, and you'll be that teacher of morality. And you have to do it by yourself. You have to do it by yourself. But pour it on. Don't back off from it. Don't be hesitant just because you're only the mother. That's not true. You are the mother, and be a strong one. And you'd be a strong one in this particular area as well. But that leads me to this other question about the idea of being a role model. You know, if you don't live a moral life, you know, as a parent and as a family structure, your kids aren't going to either.
No.
I mean,
In fact, you're teaching them confusion. You're teaching them confusion.
Yeah.
They don't know how
Two
to
different
discern.
messages.
Yeah. So they're in a quandary, knowing how to make the judgments of how do I choose right or wrong. You're setting them backwards.
if you think about it as a question about why we do things, you know, maybe there needs to be an emphasis on kids learning why we behave this way and why we don't behave this way, and why we do this rather than that, or this before that, or this is a priority. Maybe we teach what, when it comes to morality, this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong, and we have a list, and everybody can generate a list. But kids will learn morality when they learn why
That's
we
very
do
good.
certain things and don't do certain things.
That's very good.
In terms of the impact on everybody else, how it affects you, how it affects your future, how is it going to impact your future?
Yeah, that's very important. There's the what, there's the how, and there's the why, but the why is the foundation.
Yeah, I think that's the foundation zone, and maybe we don't do enough teaching of why we do certain things. We're very organized around giving kids a list of what's right and wrong. We put that in the refrigerator, right? But why would we consider these behaviors to be that important?
I think there's a real danger there in not addressing and establishing foundation for why we teach what we teach. I'm trying to remember verbatim your original quote as we started the show. Courage without morality is a wild beast. Is that where that was going?
Wild beast.
I would take that and in this area of morality and also say morality without the gospel will still damn your soul. Our country has deep roots and heritage of moral conservatism. Many people will take us back to the founding fathers and certain documents that our country has drawn up by way of moral guidance and principles and laws. And so we have this idea that if we just have morally conservative children, they're going to be okay. That really isn't true. That's all Israel had to do then, is they just had to obey God completely and they would be fine. Well, they prove over and over that the inability to be righteous in our own is not something that we're comfortable at getting at, because then we also have to face our own depravity, much less teach our children depravity about themselves. But how glorious it is when people in the family unit can come together and say, I'm so imperfect as a parent, you are imperfect as my child, but let's turn our focus toward a perfect God who gives us perfect righteousness in his perfect Son through the gospel. And I just think I don't know how else we get there other than sprinkles of tradition and moral conservatism, which really, that's not going to carry us very far. And it's showing a lot of divide in our country, because some have the idea that we just have to get back to the good old days as it was maybe in the 50s. Well, you know what they say, if you are always looking to get back somewhere, you either have a bad memory or you've got a good imagination. You know, we can't just long for the past and the way things were. We've got to long for Christ.
But let me ask you this question. You have raised kids, and you've encouraged them to do service projects. in the community. Some of them may have gone to other countries, to help another group of people. Is that teaching morality? I mean, is that an important part? I mean, should we look for opportunities for our kids to do service projects in our community and beyond our community? Because that is giving them that sense of other people and caring for other people and being sensitive to the needs of other people and helping other people and feeling good about that, and on down the line.
Yeah, that's going back to the why again, and the common good. And it's not about me. Actually, we're just really, we're born with that me, with me, everything, and that's what God transforms.
You got to break that. And maybe 5th grade, 6th grade, like we were talking about, you kind of break that idea that it's all me before, but then after grade 5 or 6, it starts to be, and now there's other people also, and I can serve them, or I can help them, or I can be part of their life, and learn from them as well. As we're teaching them that interaction.
They may not even feel the benefit of that until after they come back, or while they're there.
Well, maybe later, years later, even.
They may not want to, but if they do it, and then they get the benefit. So sometimes you do have to kind of push. But I think what's coming to my mind here is that we don't want to be saying, put forth great effort, because that's going to be the answer. Great effort to be moral. We really can't be moral on our own. We get so to the place where we're burned out, or we're used up, or we're thinking differently than we did before because we can't do it on our own. And you so beautifully talked about how we need the gospel, how we need to be made right with God, and then we have His power. We're empowered then. And it's not us, not our effort, so we don't even get the glory or the good feeling.
It really starts with the parent, doesn't it? I mean, I think that's what you're saying. I mean, it really starts here with me.
To do that, to model that.
You're the role model. You're the example.
Yeah.
You're the one that puts it in life. You make sense. And if your life is over here and what you talk about is over here, that's that incongruency you talked about. I mean, that goes nowhere. Yeah.
You kind of learn how to behave before you have the ability to do it, other than great effort, and then you get burned out.
Yeah. What about tough love?
Yeah.
There are kids that are tough to manage. They're tough to discipline. They don't obey. Classroom, home, and parents try this, they try that, and all of a sudden they come to this idea that I've got to use tough love. I got to be mean almost. I have to be very, very profound in my dealing with the kid. Does that teach morality, or does that teach kind of fear, if you will?
Boy, that's tough love. You said it earlier, Kathy, on how in our parenting we are learning about God as Father and Him parenting us. And I know His tough love for me, His love for me is often tender, and sometimes it's very tough. Sometimes it's been said that sometimes God has to put us flat on our backs in order for us to look up at Him, because we're so busy looking everywhere else.
That's tough love. A kid sometimes has to be brought to his knees.
Psalm 23, a psalm many love. He makes us lie down in green pastures. God has to kind of put us down and force us down to really understand who He is, so that we have perspective as opposed to just running around like headless chickens. So taking that now and applying it to our kids. You were talking about a baby that was just flailing and just so worked up that just to hold them, there's an actual tough love and constraint. And God does that with us too, when He constrains us from crossing the spiritual street that we shouldn't, that freeway that He knows will just get taken out. God is even gracious in His constraining, in His stopping and putting me down and slowing me down. I think tough love is another term for love.
Yeah.
It's part of love. It's a form of it. And sometimes that needs to be drawn upon. You know, you've been talking about morality, and you've done a good job teaching us today about moral development and how we can be part of that process as a parent and as a teacher and as a parent, pastor, and neighbor perhaps, and grandparents. And I mean, I don't want to overlook grandparents. They're often our teachers of morality as well, and play a very strong role in living a life which is an example, is a model. And making their comments and making their most points of instruction.
Yeah.
So we can't overlook them,
Right.
being part of the formula, as well. But before we go today, I have a quote to kind of bring us to a conclusion, and you may just think about it, maybe make a comment. Here's the quote that brings us to a conclusion today. I only know what is moral is what you feel good afterwards. And what is immoral is what you feel bad after. So behavior results into a feeling. And if that feeling is good, you probably have a sense that you've done something good and that's a moral behavior. But if you have that sense that it didn't turn out very well, or you're ashamed, or you're embarrassed, or you're regretful that you did something, you probably did something we consider immoral. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a way of kind of gauging it, I guess, is after the fact. Comment and we'll end.
Yeah, I resonate with that. I think we could feel bad for other reasons than not being moral, but yeah, I think it's neat the way God made us to have a confirmation maybe from Him that we did the moral thing.
Well, anyway, thank you.
Thank
You did great in our little discussion today, and thanks for joining us today. And pick us up next week. And remember the course, if you'd like a little course on parenting, just do it at your own time, at your own leisure. You can take it over the course of a year's time. Just periodically, just tune in to this little program and you pick up a little course in parenting whenever you have extra time. So there it is, and the address is down below as to how you can access that particular course. It's in conjunction with Fresno Pacific University. So anyway, thanks for joining us today, and bye for now.
All right. Thank you.
The Green Gables Care Home is a 24-hour assisted living facility for the elderly located in Clovis, California, offering spacious private and semi-private rooms which are wheelchair approved, catering to the special person in your life who needs attention and wants to live in a loving home environment. The Green Gables Care Home has assisted living in secured homes for elderly with Alzheimer's, memory loss, and for your loved ones needing assistance with their activities of daily living. Call 559-297-9438 and visit greengablescarehome.com.
Sometimes good intentions hurt rather than help. For just $1.76 per meal, the Fresno Rescue Mission offers more than food. We offer hope. Please donate today.
Do you need a locksmith? Layman's Lock and Safe Service and Repair is available for you. 559-228-1805.
Gained a lot, learned a lot, and got a lot of love. If it weren't for the knowledge that I had gained from the classes at PCC, I probably wouldn't be the mom I am today. See, there it goes.
I would love you to meet my son, Aaron. My situation was very difficult. I didn't know how my life was going to turn out.
We graduated in June 2010 and we got married in July. And through family, the Pregnancy Care Center changed our lives.
The Pregnancy Care Center was a huge, vital part in helping me walk through that pregnancy, in educating me and loving on me during that time.
Choosing a Medicare plan can be difficult and frustrating. Susan Hatch can guide you through the Medicare maze and help find the right plan for you. Susan helps people understand the confusing and drastic changes that occur every year in Medicare. Susan will only recommend plans that will protect your assets and allow you to continue to see your personal doctor. As a 100% independent agent, Susan is not controlled by any particular insurance company to steer a person onto any one particular plan. Susan was awarded the #1 Medicare supplement agent in California. Look for Susan's Medicare question and answers every Monday in the Fresno Bee. Call Susan at 559-307-2287 and visit MedicareToday.net.
CentralValleyTalk.com